If you ever worked in retail or the food industry, you probably have an idea of what a closing shift is like. The last minute customer that comes right when you just finished cleaning, or the awkward moments where you have to kick customers out when it's closing time. Oh, and there's also a lot of cleaning, which personally I never minded because it meant talking less to customers. The game Closing Shift is based out of Japan, where an unnamed woman is tasked with handling the closing shifts at the adorably named Chilla's Coffee. From the outside, this cute spot has beautiful lighting and an open, welcoming space that I honestly wouldn't have mind working at. When the customer first walks into the shop, it immediately took me back to when I worked for a corporate coffee chain based out of Seattle, who I shall not name, but y'all can probably guess what it is at this point. We start the game by waking up in a cozy loft apartment. When you step outside for the first time, you can see you live somewhere in a major city. As you make your way down the steps of your apartment into the parking lot, you find a cell phone ringing, and you pick it up hoping to find the owner. In the parking lot, there is a man who appears to be looking for something, and you ask if the phone belongs to them. There's an intensely awkward moment where he takes the phone and seems to be pretty ungrateful for your help and actually pretty rude. And eventually, you hop in your car and head to work, thinking that was the end of that interaction. When you arrive at the coffee shop, the first thing you're tasked with doing is to talk to Senpai, or in this case, you can also refer to them as a shift lead. He instantly scolds you for being late. He also mentions how you mess up on a lot of drinks and suggests reviewing some of the training tapes, which serves as your player tutorial. And I thought this was a really creative way to do a tutorial. He also emphasizes that you need to put your cell phone away in your locker during your shift and that texting is strictly prohibited while on the floor. Personally, I always hated this rule, not because I was hoping to text while I was bored at work, but because the risk it genuinely puts people at, especially if you're a woman closing by herself at night, like our character here. What if there's an emergency, or you get hurt and you just can't make it to your locker? How are you going to call for help if your phone is locked up? This seems to be one of the many silly production rules put into place by out-of-touch corporate managers who have no real idea of what it's like working on the floor. But I digress. We eventually meet a PI who asks if we've spotted anything suspicious in the area and explains that there have been numerous reports of people getting harassed, and he tells us to call him if we do see anything concerning. Before walking away, he warns us that we should close the shop early if we want to stay out of trouble. Obviously, our character has no authority to close early, and based off of how her shift lead was treating her earlier, asking would likely result in getting severely scolded or even fired. After serving all of the customers, you begin cleaning the floors only to have the power suddenly go out as if someone cut the power. You're forced to stumble through the dark and find a breaker to turn the power back on. When the lights do come back on, there is a milk carton trail leading from the espresso table's fridge all the way back to the storage room. It's almost like a breadcrumb trail that would indicate someone maybe had grabbed like an armful of milk from the fridge and then ran back, and as they were running just started dropping milk cartons. So this is extra trippy because all of that happened in between the time that you walked from the espresso stand to where the breaker is. So other than that, you see no other traces of an intruder other than the milk carton trail. But this sets the stage for us knowing that, you're not alone in the coffee shop. So after returning the milk cartons back to the fridge, you get a vague cutscene from a mysterious person who is not our character, and it seems to take place inside the coffee shop since one of the boxes has the Chilla's logo. Then it cuts out and we start the next day in our apartment. You leave the cozy apartment to start the next shift, and when you arrive at the shop, you have to speak with Senpai. He scolds us again for being late, and he even gets in a couple of insults while berating you. I think the intent here is to make us feel more alone, and that Senpai is pretty much unapproachable if there are any real problems. The shift lead also seems to have a sense of resentment towards the character. When you finish serving the customers, the closing part of the shift starts and you begin to bus the tables. At one of the tables in the back, we find a photo that someone took without your consent or knowledge. It's unclear at this time who it could be. Who took that photo? Was it a customer you already spoke to or a person we haven't met yet? This adds to the slow paranoia build, especially as the customers start pointing out more strange aspects of the coffee shop and asking if the shop is haunted. After you pick up the photo, it cuts to the next day where the music you hear is just like this staticky white noise compared to the calming piano music of the coffee shop. And I think this really adds to the dread your character must be feeling about going to work each day. This time, while you walk to your car, you get jump scared coming out of the stairwell of your apartment by a woman who's walking with her baby in a stroller. She scolds us for not watching where we're going and implying that young ones these days are so rude. And I think this scene does a really good job of making players feel more on edge, especially in stairwells, where in the real world there is a higher threat of assault. You go from feeling complacent whenever you leave your apartment to now suddenly wondering what's around every corner. Seemingly safe areas start to feel different. And after entering your car this time, there's another cutscene of someone watching you drive away. There's certainly an escalation of events here as the stalker seems to know where you now live. When you arrive at work to speak with Senpai, they say that you're doing your very first closing shift. And I thought this was interesting because it seemed like before we were closing by ourselves because we never saw any other sign of Senpai, but maybe this is another effect of the game. You feel alone even if it supposedly seems like there's other people working with you, and we just don't see them when we're playing the game. So you ask Senpai if they happen to get any strange customers around at night. He tells you sometimes, but to just brush it off, because yeah, we know that's how it works. It's here when you tell them that you're afraid that you're being stalked. And rather than showing any compassion or concern, he just mocks you and implies that you're not attractive enough to be stalked, which of course is a wild thing to believe because you don't have to be conventionally attractive for someone to stalk you. And I think this really adds to the helpless state your character starts to spiral down towards. After all, Senpai brushes off your concerns and keeps you on the closing shift. How could you not feel powerless after that interaction? And as someone who's experienced something similar to this when I was in the military, I really related a lot to what this character's experience was. Women are often held at fault or victim blamed in scenarios like this. People ask, why didn't they call the police or tell their manager? And oftentimes women do report these issues, but it's either not considered urgent enough to warrant a police investigation, or just the concerns overall are ignored by bosses until the situation escalates so much that it becomes super dangerous for anyone involved. Women can do everything right to protect themselves, but still be in danger. As a society, we really need to shift away from victim blaming and address the issues that shut down negative, violent behaviors targeting women and other minority groups. But once again, I digress because I could go on for hours about this subject. As mentioned before, I can't help but empathize with her character. It seems that she's desperate for someone to help. And this time, when you wrap up your shift at the end, doing all the cleaning and bussing, you start hearing a buzzing sound coming from the TV with the shop security camera. And you go over to investigate to see that the stalker is staring at the security camera, and it almost feels like they're just making direct eye contact to you somehow through it. And once you step away from the security TV to go out and look at the drive-thru, you see that there is a note attached to the menu. The note he leaves you says, "The day we first met, yes, Achilla, she smiled at me like a flower. Just thinking about her makes my heart pound. I never felt this easy before. I wonder if she's putting a smile on everyone's faces like she does mine." After picking up the note, another cutscene happens where it looks like the stalker has been taking more photos of you, and they're now surrounded by food that seems to be from the shop that they maybe stole. The scene ends, and you return back to the cozy loft apartment where we now prepare for another day and another shift at work. On our way out the front door, we're basically stopped and halted right in our tracks because we see another note from the stalker. And it says, "I know her best. Maybe after your mother and father. I'll really be number one in time. She talked to me. She picked up my phone and went out of her way to give it to me. I knew she felt the same way I did. We are in love. Today is our anniversary." This finally confirms the stalker was the first man you see in the game, the one with the awkward, intense stare. These letters just show how much the stalker's behavior has escalated and makes you wonder what will happen next. You continue on and try to enter your car as usual to get to work. However, your car seems to be broken down this time, and it's obvious that the stalker has done something to sabotage your car, forcing you to take the bus. On the way to the bus stop, it's hard not to feel dread and paranoia as you walk around every corner, wondering if the man will jump out at you. When you finally do get to the bus stop, your character seems to be scared, and when you enter the bus, instead of music, we just hear a heartbeat as if your character has adrenaline pulsing through their system. We're in full flight mode. And to add to the tension, a man enters the bus and stares at you for a few moments. While he isn't the stalker, you can't help but wonder if he's planning something too. When you do get off the bus, there's a high-pitched whine noise that makes me think of when a loud noise like a firework goes off. For a second, you can't hear anything but a high-pitched ringing noise, and your senses are drowned out. This almost makes me think of a deer walking alone in the woods on a snowy day while a cougar waits, watching behind the trees, waiting to make their move. When you finally start your shift, Senpai seems to be even less present than before. There's a brief, awkward interaction with him in the bathroom, and then he's gone. A car comes up to the drive-thru, and while you're serving them, a man who looks like the stalker enters the shop and staring at you. And depending on where you're at in the shop, you might be able to see the stalker enter, or just be totally surprised to find them in the lobby after serving the drive-thru customer. He doesn't order anything and just sits at an empty table in the lobby where he can see everything you do. At this point, he's not even hiding from you anymore. And when you walk around trying to get out of his line of sight, the gaze of the stalker just follows you. Eventually, another customer walks in, and while helping the customer, the man walks away. And to me, this is a big indicator that the stalker was going to strike soon. When you enter the end of the shift, the lights cut out again, and a small stream of red light trickles through, making everything feel that much more eerie. Suddenly, creepy shadowy figures that look almost like ghosts walk in and start ordering drinks. You're forced to make the drinks with a countdown timer because you can't enter the office where the recipes are, and you have to make them all from memory. We get drink after drink order, and there seems to be no end of this flood of ghostly orders until the timer runs out. I don't think there is a way for us actually to get all the drink orders done in time. And when the timer cuts off, the red light goes away, and you're just left in the dark, where you have to try to go into the back room like before and try to use the breaker to turn the light on. And at this point, there's a shadow person who emerges from a locked door in the storage room and charges at you. The game cuts to black, and you wake up in your bed with the alarm blaring. This felt odd to me because if I recall correctly, we were usually sitting down by the TV getting ready to start the day, and I don't remember waking up in the bed in the previous cutscenes or anything else where we were just starting a new day. You then get another cutscene from the stalker's perspective here, and they're watching us from the drive-thru. And this time on your way to work, our car is working again, and when you arrive, your phone is already in your locker as if to indicate you had left it there last night. And it took me my second playthrough to realize the dire implications of this scene. We know that the stalker at the end of the game has been sleeping in the back room behind the door that is locked for the majority of the game. And When the shadow person attacks your character in the storage room, they're standing in the doorway that had been previously locked to you. And I think with the context of our phone still being in the locker, our character waking up in their bed, and us knowing the stalker entered the lobby that evening, there's enough context to imply something very awful happened to our character. With that unsettling start to our shift, the first person who shows up is the PI, who thanks you for calling them. He says that he'll take a look around and that the police likely would have disregarded your concerns to keep their workload light. The next customer that comes in are two women stating that there is a person outside taking pictures of you and the coffee shop. This only shows how bold the stalker has become. They aren't even hiding the fact that they're watching you, not to you and not to anyone else around you. The third customer that comes in is the woman in the stroller who you might recognize from earlier that scared the crap out of us when we walked down from the stairwell and almost ran right into them. There's some strange sniffing sounds when the woman arrives at the shop, and at first I thought it was her, but then once the woman leaves, there's a few moments where the sniffing sounds continue. I think that's the stalker watching through the drive-thru window, just like what we saw before in the previous cutscene. And since it's cold outside, you're likely just hearing them sniffle, and that tells you how close in proximity this person is to you. The fourth customer comes in and orders a drink. While doing so, she mentions that something strange occurred, but doesn't elaborate until after you provide them their drink. It's as if she knows something is wrong in her gut, but just doesn't know what it is. She tells you she saw someone on the roof, and after she leaves, you use the ladder to investigate for yourself, thinking it could be the PI. The music shifts here to kind of like an eerie sound instead of the calming piano music from the shop. And when you get to the roof, you see that the ventilation shaft has been opened and it leads down into the locked area in the storage room. And from there, we see the stalker's pictures, a sleeping bag, and a screwdriver. You'll likely recognize these things from the stalker's cutscenes, and it dawns on you how long the stalker has been sleeping in the shop just to watch you. The discovery makes your character close up shop, and as soon as you flip the closing sign over, the stalker slams themselves against the door, creating another intense jump scare. Utterly alone, you now have to figure out where to go in order to escape. I believe this crisis point in the game is where you can have 3 possible endings depending on your decisions. However, all of them still end with your character dying. The way I escaped the first time was climbing onto the roof and throwing a brick onto the stalker's head. And when you're up on the roof, you see that the PI is bleeding on the ground. I'm not sure if he's dead, but that seems to be the implication here. And after throwing the brick at the stalker, he's knocked out, but your character thinks that they've killed them. The police arrive and were unable to find his body, and it's assumed that he is still alive and at large. The police tell you that they're looking everywhere for him, and it seems now that all of your concerns have been validated. The next scene involves your character back at their apartment. There seems to be something off with the TV, and you try to call the cable company only to realize your phone is now missing. Your phone starts to ring and you try to find it. You search around your apartment, but the ringing seems to be coming from outside, and this part really made me nervous because it felt like a trap. I really didn't want to leave the apartment, but sadly you have to. You eventually follow the ringing to the parking lot, and it's directly below your porch, as if someone took your phone and dropped it over the railing. At this point, I thought there was going to be an ambush, but that doesn't happen. Instead, you go back to your apartment, and once you enter the apartment again, a cutscene triggers and the stalker emerges from the closet to kill you. The second ending is one that can happen much sooner. When you're back at the coffee shop trying to escape, the stalker attacks you in the parking lot. This one I actually got the first time through as well, because I was hoping I'd just be able to book it to the car or find a PI to help us. But when you step outside, they attack you from the alleyway and you die there. A prompt pops up to try again. So for the third ending, You can use the screwdriver your character finds in the storage room to unscrew the ventilation covering the wall in the bathroom. Before you escape outside, you hear the stalker kicking at the door as if trying to break in. The noise eventually subsides, and they seem to walk away frustrated. Wouldn't it have been nice here to have your cell phone instead of it being locked away? Heaven forbid texting, though. You eventually emerge outside and spot your car key on the ground. I'm not really sure how it got there. Maybe the stalker took it and left it there. It's not very clear. So you pick it up, and as you sneak over to your car, you pass nearby where the PI had died. There seems to be no sign of the stalker anymore. And once inside, it almost feels like you might have escaped. You speed off and crash into the PI's car, and suddenly the scene fades to black, and you're back at your apartment parking lot. Suddenly, there's a high-pitched ringing noise and you turn around. The stalker was waiting in the back seat of your car, and it's implied that he kills you here. There's an option to retry, and that makes me assume that the main ending for this game is the first one I had mentioned, where you throw the brick at the stalker's head and he ambushes you in your apartment. Because, well, that one leads to the ending credits, and we don't have a prompt to try again. So, from my understanding, there's no way for your character to survive. All the endings result in your character dying one tragic way or another. Let's talk about the customers. Throughout the game, you deal with an interesting assortment of customers, but one thing that really stood out to me was the difference in what the women had to say compared to the men. The younger women tended to be more ominous and make mentions about stalkers or men who stared at them in public. I believe that this game is trying to show how there's a pervasive threat of inappropriate male attention towards younger women. It helps build the tension for the players and makes us suspicious towards the younger men that enter the coffee shop. This is especially true before you know who the stalker is. Like, can anyone be trusted? The older women play a slightly different role. When there's direct dialogue towards your character, they seem to almost be warning you or foreshadowing of some sort of escalation with the stalker's behaviors. This is in stark contrast to how many of the men talk to you or just interact. The younger ones either try to make lighthearted jokes with you or, as in the case with one customer, aggressively try to get your phone number. This scene where the man is pressuring you for your number also hit home with me, as I had numerous aggressive men do this to me when I would just try to commute to and from work. They'd pressure me into giving them my phone number even though it was obvious that I was not interested in them, and also, me being a lesbian, I had no interest in them. And they would often test their phone numbers to make sure it wasn't fake, so I didn't even have the option to give a fake phone number like what the character has in this scene, because giving a fake number is not always a safe way to get out of a situation, especially if they are testing the phone numbers that you give them. So you might ask me why I gave these strange men the number that I didn't want to give them. Well, simply put, I'm a 5'2" woman who is alone with a large aggressive man following me. I wasn't about to risk making them mad and face retaliation for their fragile ego. So again, this scene was really powerful to me. The older men's dialogue was also super interesting. Some seemed to hold an air of kind of like privilege and authority, like the first customer who said that the coffee shop made them feel uncomfortable, and I wasn't sure if this was because they felt out of place and we were just seeing their insecurity. Most telling though is that we get a few older men who say they thought they saw a man, but then instantly brush it off as a ghost and ask if the shop or even if your character is haunted. And maybe I'm reading too much into this, but this struck me as the most stark contrast between the women and the men characters. This guy just couldn't comprehend that maybe there was a man standing there acting suspicious, and instead of being able to wrap his mind around that, just leaped to a more abstract concept like the paranormal, because the threat of real life situations like a man stalking you or your character just felt so intangible as a ghost haunting. To the women characters, the threat of men stalking them or assaulting them are part of their everyday environments to watch out for. Meanwhile, the men seemed to really have no worries about their environment or just had concerns about, again, abstract ones like ghosts. I think this is because they don't really have to worry about the same threats that women do, and that was the game trying to highlight this. One thing I found rather funny with all of these character interactions is that several customers make mentions of like stalkers or unsettling people in the area, tell you to watch out for them, but then they give you no description of that person. Like, how can you watch out for something if you have no idea what to watch out for? And I think this was intentionally part of the script because it keeps us, the player, guessing throughout the game, wondering if tensions will continue to escalate. Most of the early customer chatter feels like they just want to add on to your paranoia and build a scene where it becomes difficult to trust whichever customer comes through your door. So, I can't help but appreciate this game for the level of creativity it offers. I think it successfully developed a realistic depiction of feeling unsafe. Regardless of whether you've had an experience similar to this character, I think all players can empathize on some level. Sometimes, horror stories based in reality are the scariest kind. The way the developers build tension felt like the correct pacing for this short indie game. The mechanics that force you to do mundane chores place you at ease. There's a strict boss who nitpicks at your performance and never seems to have something positive to say. It really helps set the mood and makes you feel like you're working at a coffee shop. I also loved how the customer interactions helped tell the story. Some characters brought up hauntings, others talked down to you or others, and confirmed your fears of a stalker. All of it felt relevant and immersive. All of these interactions make you feel like you're on edge more and more as the stalker's behaviors escalate. Nobody truly lends a helping hand until it's too late. Even when someone does try to help, our character still perishes in a way that feels 100% preventable. It makes you feel sad that there was nothing we could do to change the outcome of their fate, even when we try to fight back. And as a former barista, I truly loved this game and look forward to playing more games from the developers Chilla's art. Thank you all for watching, and I hope this was an interesting breakdown of, this amazing game. And if you want to see my shenanigans and stumble through this game, you can watch my gameplay here. And I really hope, again, you all enjoyed this. And I'm looking forward to maybe doing more of these videos. Let me know in the comments if you enjoyed this and maybe what other games you'd like to see me break down. Hope you all have a good one, and bye.